Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my Thor Love and Thunder movie review. We're firmly in Marvel Phase 4. Chris Hemsworth's one of the few Marvel Phase 1 original Avengers actors who can now say he's gotten a fourth sequel to his spin-off movies, not counting all those big Avengers crossover movies they do together. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We're doing an IMAX ticket giveaway for the movie. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and just post your favorite Thor moment on the video. And since I'm posting this before the movies come out everywhere, please don't post really big spoilers in the comments. Don't worry, I will release my post-credit scene video, full Easter eggs breakdown videos, bonus videos for the rest of the really specific things in the movie later this week after it comes out. Because there is a lot of really big, really cool stuff that we have to talk about. But just starting with the biggest thing, probably the biggest Thor in the room, is that this movie is very much the brainchild of Taika Waititi. There's all kinds of jokes now about how when you listen to Kevin Feige and Taika both talk about making the movie, Kevin Feige sounds kind of like Taika's dad. Like Taika Waititi is this little kid running around they've given all this power to, and he's just trying to create this movie out of the most crazy things that just pop out of his brain. Like, what is the craziest thing I could possibly do with a Thor character with these Marvel movies? So Thor Ragnarok was like a huge left turn for the franchise when he came on board. Like, we joke about it being the first movie in a new Thor trilogy because it's so different from the first two Thor films. You almost consider it like a soft reboot of the character in the franchise. You have to imagine when they were making that movie, Taika Waititi was very conservative because he was brand new on the lot, like very first Marvel movie, so he was a little more conservative in his creative choices and what they did with the movie just in general. But because Ragnarok utterly crushed the box office of the first two Thor films, it was so successful, it just feels like that empowered him, and Marvel and Kevin Feige just let him do whatever he wanted to do with Thor Love and Thunder. Like, Taika Waititi was like, okay, gloves come off, I'm gonna make this movie as huge and crazy as possible. I would say the trailers have been pretty honest about the tone and the vibe of what's going on during the movie. Sometimes Marvel trailers can be kind of misleading about the tone and just what's going on during the movie in general. Like, they try to be very misleading with the Spider-Man No Way Home trailers. But everything you see in the Thor Love and Thunder trailers is pretty true to the tone and the feel of the movie just in general. So in that sense, Love and Thunder is very much a Taika Waititi movie, so it's like super Ragnarok in a creative sense. So if you like what Taika Waititi did with Thor Ragnarok in the characters, you'll probably love Thor Love and Thunder. Like, it gives you Thor Ragnarok times 100. But if you didn't like what Taika Waititi did with Thor Ragnarok or with the Thor character, you're probably not going to like Thor Love and Thunder quite as much. One of my favorite aspects of the movie, though, is all the deep cosmic mythology that it gets into. It's like a mixture of the Gorr storyline from the comics, which itself was really cool. I would definitely recommend going out and reading that Gorr storyline if you haven't read those comics yet. The Mighty Thor Jane Foster arc, where she became a version of Thor, which is a completely different storyline in the comics, done in the tone of something like Big Trouble, Little China, like Big Trouble, Little Asgard. There's even a point in the trailers where you hear Thor say, another classic Thor adventure. Like, that's the tone of the movie, basically. Ragnarok was very 80s inspired. Thor Love and Thunder, as you can see from the trailers, is also very 80s inspired, mixed with a lot of really cool cosmic concepts and super OP characters and deep cuts that don't really fit in like the lower Earth-based ground level movies and series. Like, this is all stuff in the trailer, so I don't think it's a spoiler to say, like, they're not going to talk about the Watcher, the cosmic entity Death on Hawkeye. And because Thor is a real god in the MCU, because of the nature of the Gorr storyline, they use the movie to explain how gods exist in the MCU and do more with the MCU gods just in general than you've seen in previous Marvel movies and series, like Moon Knight, for example. And they've kind of addressed his role as a god in the MCU during previous Thor movies, but this movie really goes there, like you really learn how the other gods exist, and there are many gods in the MCU. It's even more cosmic than like Doctor Strange 2, which featured a character like the Living Tribunal. So if you really like those cosmic characters, those concepts from stuff like the Thanos Infinity Gauntlet comics, like the Ultimates comics where you see the most powerful, most abstract characters to ever cross the page in Marvel, this movie gets into that in spades. It is barely a 2-hour movie, so one of my few complaints is that it feels kind of like a speedrun version of all that. Like, wait a minute, there are all these big cosmic concepts, all these really cool things that you're introducing in the movie. Spend more time on that. Hopefully they'll use other Marvel movies and Marvel series to get into that in a bigger way. I'll address this in a second, but I think one of the reasons why the movie is so short and feels like such a speedrun is because they wanted it to feel very self-contained compared to a movie, say, like Doctor Strange 2, which had so many different things, so many different ideas going on during the film. Chris Hemsworth was great as Thor. He's been playing the character for so long, he could do it in his sleep. And just like the movie is metaphorically bigger than any Thor movie that's come before, Chris Hemsworth himself has found a way to become literally bigger and buffer than he has ever been in any Marvel movie before. Seriously, it seems like he gets bigger every time a new Marvel movie comes. And like we told all the jokes about Thor gaining all that weight during Avengers Endgame, the movie does spend some time early in the film with a funny 80s style inspired workout montage explaining how he lost the weight. Like, okay, yeah, we've done that, we're not going to do that again, but let's turn it into a funny thing about how he gets swole again. You all remember Thor Ragnarok, obviously. He does a great job of playing that big, dumb animal version of Thor. Like, he almost can't be hurt physically, so they just use him a lot for comedy in situations like that. But he's also gotten way better at doing the dramatic, more emotional Thor stuff as well. And there is a lot of that during the movie too. Like, the entire movie isn't just wall-to-wall jokes. Like, it does turn on a dime to really emotional stuff during periods. Natalie Portman was also really good at balancing those different aspects of the characters in the film out. Like, you think of her as a more dramatic actress to begin with, but it's almost like Taika Waititi took her character, Jane Foster, and Ragnaroked her. Like, okay, we're just going to completely reimagine you and do a different version of your character that's going to be way better than the version that we did in the previous Marvel movies. So even though on a story level, there's a lot of different things going on with her character, just creatively in general, she feels kind of like a soft reboot of the character. She also did a good job with the funny meathead Thor-related comedy in the film. Like, she obviously becomes a version of Thor you've seen in all the trailers. Along with that comes a lot of the Thor-specific comedy that you see from characters that are that big and that powerful. And Christian Bale, you can't say enough about that dude. He's amazing in everything that he does, so there was no doubt that he was going to be amazing in this movie. Everyone was just wondering what Gorr was going to look like and what they were going to do with his story from the comics, because the Gorr storyline is such a cool storyline. They did make some creative changes to Gorr's look most people will be talking about. The way Taika Waititi explained that is that they changed his face to make it look a little bit more human because he wanted to avoid the obvious comparison that a lot of casual fans would make to Voldemort. They also did change Gorr's storyline a little bit from the comics just to fit with what they've already done in the MCU. So everything just makes sense on a cosmic level. And remember, it is a 2-hour movie, so it's like a speedrun version of Gorr's storyline from the comics. They've been hyping him up as one of the best characterizations of a villain in Marvel that they've ever done. I do agree that he's probably one of the better villain storylines that Marvel's ever done next to Loki and Thanos, not only because Christian Bale is so fantastic, he's so great at performing the character, but also because you understand where he's coming from in the same way that you understood where Thanos was coming from. Like, there's all the memes, Thanos was right. That was actually a huge plot twist in the comics as well, in a completely different later storyline, where they literally do the line, Gorr was right. So you'll probably come out of this movie saying, Gorr was right. Like, that'll be one of the next big memes. So for example, just talking about Thor's specific characters, if Malekith in Thor the Dark World was one of their weakest villains ever in a Marvel movie, Christian Bale is probably like the exact opposite of that. And like I said, even though the movie is super short for a Marvel movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy were all great. James Gunn did get to oversee some of the dialogue and creative of their scenes during the movie. Anytime they use the Guardians and other big scenes, like when they used them during Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, James Gunn got to oversee their parts of the film. They were all fantastic. They were only in the movie for a little bit, but they were an important part of the film. And like I said, I think that's because they wanted this to feel like a smaller, self-contained Thor story. Like, if you put the Guardians in there for the entire movie, then it turns into something completely different. And even though there are a lot of things that happen in it, there are a lot of cosmic ramifications going forward in Marvel Phase 4, a lot of cosmic consequences, the story is very much self-contained to the Thor character. Kind of in the same way that the Black Panther movie was self-contained relative to what you think from other Marvel Phase 1, Phase 2 movies that were much more interconnected. So if you didn't like Doctor Strange 2 because there were so many different storylines and things and characters going on in that movie, so many big left turns with the new characters, you'll probably enjoy Thor Love and Thunder more just because it focuses more on the core characters. And because the movie is so heavily inspired visually, creatively from the 80s, the score is very 80s inspired, the movie probably has some of the best music of any Marvel movie so far. That includes the original sound score they created for the movie and also the real 80s songs like the pop songs that they licensed for the movie. Like, real good example of that is Ronnie James Dio's Rainbow in the Dark. The funny thing is that Taika Waititi told us years ago what the tone, the vibe of the film was going to be, some of the music. When they announced the movie at Marvel Comic-Con 2019, that's how long ago it was, 2019, the actors came on stage to Ronnie James Dio's Rainbow in the Dark. And without giving away spoilers or anything, that song is in the movie. But you have to imagine the entire movie is that vibe, that tone, that type of music. One of my few complaints about the movie, though, was some of the cinematography, and you'll probably see this complaint in common from a lot of different people. There's a significant chunk of the movie that was filmed on those new LED wall sound stages, like the same tech that they used to film the Mandalorian series, where instead of building everything practically, they just generate it digitally on LED walls. And it becomes very obvious in some scenes, like it seems like a downgrade in some scenes almost. Maybe they'll polish that in the next few weeks, because Marvel does do this. They are known to release movies before everything is completely finished. So if you went to see Avengers Endgame, for instance, opening weekend, and then you saw it again a couple weeks later, the second version that you saw a couple weeks later would have even better looking CGI. So Marvel continues to re-release and polish versions of movies while they're still in theaters. So I think it'll be a similar case with Thor Love and Thunder. We'll have to compare it to the other upcoming Marvel movies like Black Panther 2 and Ant-Man 3 Quantumania with King the Conqueror that use some similar LED wall technology to film their big scenes to see if they do a better job over time, because I think part of it is also Marvel just getting used to using those creatively in the making of their movies. Like over time, they'll get better at using the technology, and the technology itself will become more seamless. Just on a story level, thematically, tonally, the movie does a good job at taking Thor to the next logical stage in his journey, like without giving away big spoilers or anything like that. Don't worry, I will talk about all the really specific things during the movie's plot details and what's happening with all the characters next in the MCU when we get to Easter egg videos later this week. But if you're a fan of following the character all these years, like you're a fan of the first Thor movie, the second Thor movie, just seeing him evolve over time, they take him to like the next logical stage. And if you've read the comics, you have an idea of where they're taking this character, like on a real cosmic level. A simpler way of thinking about it is the movie is Thor just kind of coming to terms with all the trauma that he's experienced and putting that into context and just figuring out what it is that he's supposed to be doing with all of his god tier power. Like, I have all this power, what am I supposed to do with it? Some of you who are longtime comic book fans will be like, I have an answer for that. I can tell you exactly what he needs to be doing next because of all these big storylines that they're setting up. Don't worry, we'll talk about that later this week after the movie comes out. Big reminder to stay through the credits because there are 2 post-credit scenes like most traditional Marvel movies. Like, one of them is a reference back to something that happened earlier in the film, and another is meant to tease what's happening next with the storyline with the characters. Please do not post spoilers for the post-credit scenes in the comments below. Don't worry, I will do full videos for that later this week after the movie comes out. But if you have any big questions about what's going on with the characters, what's going on with the movie, what's going on with the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just write it below in the comments and I'll address it during my bonus videos later this week. Like I said, I've got a whole bunch of bonus videos for the movie that I'll start posting on Friday when it comes out, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss those. Speaking of Thor, we just got our first look at Loki Season 2. You can click here for those scenes and learn what's going on during those episodes, and click here for all my Thor Love and Thunder videos. I'll be sure to update the link as soon as I start posting my post-credit scenes and full breakdown and Easter egg videos for the movie. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.